I'm the storyteller, and my stories must be told. I have many stories, tales for both the young and old. I have many voices to describe many places. Many names have I, and many faces. In Russia I am Ivan, in Sweden I am Jan. In Germany I'm Johann, in America I'm John. From my many travels I have gathered these tales to teach you good sense when all else fails. Sometimes there are tears, sometimes there is laughter, but always are happily ever after.
Long ago and far away on the edge of a village, there stood a tumble-down old house. Two brothers lived here. Suleiman, the eldest, was very clever and quick-witted, not at all like his younger brother, Abdul. Suleiman would shake his head in despair, for Abdul was such a foolish boy. One day, Suleiman found him walking around outside holding a stick above his head. When Suleiman asked him why he was doing this, Abdul replied that he was propping up the sky so it wouldn't fall on his head. Another day, when it began to rain heavily, Abdul rushed out into the field with a pot and tried to catch all the rainwater so he wouldn't drown. And it did not matter how much Suleiman explained things to his foolish brother, Abdul always got everything wrong. Now Suleiman and Abdul's father had just died, and all he had left to his sons was the tumble-down house and a donkey. Suleiman would have liked to go off and seek his fortune, but he had promised his father that he would take care of Abdul. So in order to earn a living, Abdul would leave the house each morning, taking with him an axe. He would load up the donkey and then set out to collect firewood from the nearby forest. Of course, Abdul managed to do everything wrong as usual, and it was only because the donkey was clever and knew exactly where to go that they ever arrived in the forest at all. The donkey even knew where to stop, and then Abdul would dismount, take up his axe and go and look for fallen branches of wood. These he would chop up into logs and bring back to his brother Suleiman, who would sell them to the villagers. However, Abdul had terrible trouble with the logs. He often had to speak to them most severely, because they would not lie down quietly for him and let him chop them up. Sometimes he even had to smack them. Suleiman stayed at home and organised selling the wood. He dare not let Abdul do it, for he always got it wrong and offended their best customers. They were so poor they needed every penny. As it was, Abdul tried Suleiman's patience most sorely, and he had to control his temper greatly, not to give his foolish brother a good hiding. One day, as Abdul was about to leave the forest with his load of wood, the wind began to blow very hard, and the tree Abdul was passing began to creak and groan. As the tree rattled and shook its leaves in Abdul's face, he started back in fright. Oh dear, thought Abdul. The tree is angry and trying to frighten my poor donkey and me. I must do something. So he ran up to the tree and shouted, "Stop that, you bad tree! Stop frightening me!" But the wind just blew harder and the tree kept creaking and groaning, and Abdul got in a terrible state. He took his axe and he hit the tree, and out came a shower of golden coins. Abdul was quite overcome. What a strange tree this was. First it frightened him, and now it showered him with gifts. He'd better take this gold home to Suleiman, or he would never believe what had happened and would box his ears for telling such lies. But the coins kept running away. He must catch them, quick. Then Abdul had the cleverest thought of his life. He went over to the donkey and, taking off the sack, he took it back to where the gold coins now lay on the grass. Quickly, he filled it up. Abdul returned home in great excitement. Wouldn't Suleiman be pleased with him for being so clever? He had captured all those gold coins. Abdul was so excited, he chattered on about how he had hit a bad tree because it had frightened him, and how the tree had felt so sorry it had given him a present. Suleiman didn't understand one word Abdul was saying, and was very annoyed that he had returned home without any wood. Then Abdul said gold coins, and Suleiman, disbelieving, went over to the donkey and saw at last what Abdul was talking about. Suleiman thought quickly. They must take the gold inside before any of the villagers saw it. So the two brothers quickly took the sack of gold into the house. Suleiman was very nervous about anyone seeing the gold, for the village was full of gossips and the countryside was full of brigands. You just couldn't be too careful. So Suleiman said to his brother, "Listen, Abdul, if you give me half this gold, I will look after it all. You're so stupid, you're bound to get robbed." Abdul was quite happy to give Suleiman all the gold, for he did not know what to do with it. "Go quickly to the storekeeper and ask if you can borrow his scales," said Suleiman. "If he asks you what you are weighing, you are not weighing gold. Is that understood? We must keep it a secret." Abdul smiled, for he thought this was a wonderful game, and he was happy that Suleiman was in such a good humour. Away went Abdul through the village. There was a market in the main square where the storekeeper sold his wares, but since it was getting late, he would have no great need of his scales now. Now, the storekeeper happened to be a very nosy man, so when Abdul asked him if he could borrow his scales, the storekeeper immediately became suspicious. "Why do you want them?" he asked slyly. Abdul thought hard, then he remembered. "Well, we don't want it to weigh gold for sure," smiled Abdul. The storekeeper's ears pricked up immediately when he heard the word gold. How interesting, he thought. And slyly he dipped his finger into a pot of oil at his side. Abdul did not notice the storekeeper press his oily finger against the inside of the scale pan. Then he handed the scales to an eager Abdul, who hurried away, leaving the storekeeper to ponder about what the brothers were up to. Abdul returned home with the scales, delighted that he had managed to keep the secret and not to tell the storekeeper about the gold. Suleiman was waiting impatiently for Abdul. He quickly took the scales from his brother and hung them up. Then Suleiman carefully filled the pans with coins. He made sure that they were both the same weight before tipping them out into 2 different sacks. He continued to do this until he had weighed out all the gold. Abdul returned to the market and handed back the scales. No sooner had Abdul gone than the storekeeper quickly looked at the bottom of the pan on which he had pressed the oil, and there, sure enough, he saw sticking to it a gold coin. Thought the storekeeper, so they were weighing out gold. They must have a great fortune. And being the biggest gossip in the village, away he hurried to tell everyone about the brothers' newfound fortune. No, it wasn't a secret for long. Soon the whole village was talking about it. The brothers could not go anywhere without people whispering and pointing at them. "Look at the brothers," they'd whisper. "They have so much gold, they have to weigh it out." Suleiman was very cross, for he was sure Abdul must have told the storekeeper, although Abdul kept insisting he hadn't. But it was too late now. There was only one thing left to do. Suleiman decided that since news of their fortune was bound to be spread abroad, it would not be long before brigands heard about it and came to their house to steal the gold. The only thing the brothers could do was bury the gold somewhere safe and leave the village until all the fuss had died down. Neither of the brothers wanted to go, but the brigands were very fierce and dangerous men, and they were too scared to stay and fight them. So they buried their gold in a ditch behind the house and covered the hole with heavy stones. Then they prepared to leave. It was early morning and none of the villagers had stirred from their houses yet. The brothers decided to travel south and see if they could find work in a large town on the other side of the forest. They dare not take any gold with them in case it aroused suspicion. Suleiman felt a little ashamed of running away like this, but Abdul thought it was a wonderful adventure. So off they trotted on their faithful old donkey. They had not ridden far into the forest when Suleiman suddenly remembered something very important. "Abdul, please return to the house immediately. I forgot to shut the door. Go back and shut it. I will wait here." Abdul didn't want to go back to the village alone, but Suleiman insisted. After all, it was Abdul's fault they had to leave home in the first place. So Abdul returned to the village alone. Suleiman prepared to wait. At least this time he wouldn't have to worry. Abdul must be able to shut the door without getting confused. He hoped his brother would be quick, for he feared the brigands might already be on their way through the forest to steal the gold. Suleiman waited. Abdul seemed to be taking rather a long time to shut the door. What could he be up to? He was probably gossiping with the villagers again. Oh dear, thought Suleiman. I hope he won't tell them where we buried the gold. Then a very strange sight appeared. Suleiman turned in disbelief to see Abdul coming down the road, balancing the door on his head. This was too much. Suleiman groaned. Why had he been afflicted with such a stupid brother? "What are you doing, you fool?" yelled Suleiman as Abdul hurried towards him. "I told you to go home and shut the door. I didn't tell you to bring it with you." Foolish Abdul had thought Suleiman would have been very pleased with his idea for bringing the door. "Why did you bring it? Why?" groaned Suleiman. "I thought if the door wasn't there, nobody could go through it," explained Abdul brightly. "So I brought it with me." Poor Suleiman gritted his teeth, for he had had more than enough of his stupid brother. But it was too late to go back and replace the door now. They must hurry, for Suleiman wanted to be as far as possible from the village by nightfall. So they set off once more, Suleiman riding on the donkey while Abdul trudged along behind, whistling as he went. Abdul refused to be parted from the door, for he thought it might come in very useful if they had to get in somewhere. Suleiman said nothing, for he feared he might lose his temper if he did. On and on marched the brothers, and soon they had left their village far behind. They came at last to a rockier part of the countryside. Suleiman would stop for nothing, even though Abdul by now was beginning to find the door quite a load. Suleiman kept a lookout, for one never knew if wicked brigands were waiting in the bushes to pounce on them as they passed. Through the afternoon they kept travelling on. Suleiman knew that Abdul was tiring, but still he would not stop. It was all Abdul's fault they were in this mess. They were just entering a small wood as darkness fell. "I hope we can stop soon," thought Abdul wistfully. Suddenly, Suleiman heard something which made him stop dead in his tracks. There came the sound of horses pounding towards them. Someone was travelling at great speed. Suleiman did not waste a second. He dismounted from his donkey and led it into the thicket. Louder and louder pounded the horses' hooves as closer they came. Suleiman could hear that it wasn't a lone horseman, but several travelling at great speed. He half dragged Abdul towards a large tree. They must hide quickly, for Suleiman guessed it was brigands coming, and he had no wish to get caught. He was right. It was indeed brigands that came galloping down the road. Suleiman scrambled up into the tree. "Hurry, brother," whispered Suleiman urgently. "Please hurry, the brigands are coming." But Abdul would not leave the door behind, for he feared that the brigands might open it. Suleiman had to agree, since if the brigands saw a door in the middle of the forest, they might wonder. But hurry they must. Suleiman pulled at the door frantically as it kept getting stuck in the branches. The brothers were very, very frightened. Would they be caught? Closer and closer came the sound of those hooves as Suleiman pulled Abdul up into the tree. It wasn't a moment too soon. Abdul's feet disappeared among the leaves just as the first brigand arrived. "Whoa!" cried the brigand leader to the other two men. "Let's stop and make camp here for the night." They stopped right underneath the tree where the brothers were hiding. "Hush! Don't move," hissed Suleiman. They watched the three brigands tie up their horses. They looked so wicked and fierce, the brothers shivered. "We'll be in the village by morning," chuckled the leader, as they settled round a fire and brewed up their coffee. They were tired, for they had ridden hard all day. Now, when Suleiman heard the word village, he knew they must mean his village. They had heard about his gold. They must keep quiet until the brigands fell asleep. It wasn't long before the brigands stretched themselves out on the ground and began to nod off. When Abdul saw this, it made him feel very tired. He yawned and dropped the door. Down it fell on the brigands. Up they jumped in panic. Now, these brigands were some of the fiercest in the land, and they would fight any man or beast, but they had never ever seen a door fall from the sky before. Away they ran to their horses and sped off down the road the way they had come, swearing that they would never return to this accursed region again. Suleiman and Abdul laughed and laughed. The next morning they returned happily home, for they knew the brigands would spread the news of the falling door and tell the other robbers to keep away. As soon as they returned to the house, they quickly dug up their fortune. They were delighted, for now they could repair the house and buy some new clothes. And this is exactly what they did. Suleiman bought himself and Abdul a fine new outfit. Suleiman also found himself a pretty young wife, of whom he was very proud. Abdul was delighted, for Suleiman found him a wife too. She kept a sharp eye on him and made sure that he didn't get into too much trouble. For Abdul's foolishness didn't disappear with his newfound fortune. He still got everything wrong. But now they were wealthy, it didn't matter quite so much. Yes, there was no doubt about it, thought Suleiman. Being foolish can be very useful sometimes.